And then we've got the CPA exam, right? And that's changing as well. And so we've got to keep up with those additional changes and make sure that they know what's coming down the pike so that they can respond to those needs as well.
No, that's awesome that you're doing that. I mean, I think that's a critical piece of, you know, the pipeline, if you want to call it, the pipeline of the accountants. So yeah, no, that's great.
I mean, do you find, or, you know, I feel like a while, I mean, I'm kind of an anomaly. I walked out of high school. I took my introductory to accounting in high school and walked out and I was like, I'm going to be an accountant. And I was 17, right? But that maybe there's been a little bit of like a loss of prestige associated with the profession. Like kind of when I think back, I was like, okay, you've got like doctors, lawyers, and accountants. They're kind of these prestigious titles, professions. And then, you know, going forward, it's like, well, you know, I can be in IT and that's way more glamorous, or I can be a coder, I can be in tech. You know, I can do something a little more glamorous, maybe make a little bit more money. Or if I've got to do, you know, 5 years of school, why not do 8 or 7 and I'll be a lawyer and I'll make 3 times as much money right out of law school, still have to take an exam, still have to do all these entrance components, but I get to make more money and be debt-free faster potentially. Like, do you think there's any kind of shift in just the outward perception of the accounting title, accountant title, CPA, whatnot?
Yeah, I think over time that's certainly a consideration. You know, I don't see so many of the students I work with are already business students. It's a question of, are they going to be business administration? Are they going to be marketing? Are they going to be finance? Are they going to be an entrepreneur major or an accounting major? And so I don't see people that are necessarily pre-med, pre-law, those kinds of things. So I don't have those conversations. But for all of those business students that I do work with, many of them kind of as a default go with, I'm going to become a business administration major. And so those are probably the best students that I have an ability to have a conversation with, an extended conversation about, hey, if you're good at accounting, this could be a particular avenue for you. Or maybe you're not ready to pull the trigger on an accounting major, but hey, if you want to go into entrepreneurship, you still need to know about accounting. So maybe you need to pull the trigger on an accounting minor. Now, that's not going to help the overall CPA profession because they're not ultimately going to become a CPA, but it will help them prepare for what they're going to see as an entrepreneur, right, in running an actual business, because there are a whole host of accounting issues that you need to understand. Maybe you're not going to be doing them, but at least you should have an understanding of managerial accounting concepts or taxation concepts, because those are all going to have an implication if you think you're going to be an entrepreneur as you move forward in your career.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when my husband and I will be talking about something, he'll be like, well, I'll say something, we're like, well, I don't know how to do that. And he's like, aren't you an accountant? It's like, well, yes.
You're supposed to know everything.
Where I'm at, like, and kind of where Tram lives, although she's an anomaly because she's both a lawyer and a CPA, I almost live more on the side of law than I live on the side of numbers. And so I think too, that we can open up, and I don't know how to do this because I don't. I was going to make a joke that I'm just an accountant, right? That it's not just green visor playing with numbers and like auditing bank records, right?
Sure.
Like we have something that's kept me in the profession and kept me in like public accounting is just all of these different businesses that I get to work with, that we get to work with on a daily basis between, you know, we've just industry wise, just.
And not just work with, but to make a significant contribution to those organizations, because more often than not, a good tax advisor can pay well more back to the company than whatever fees the company is paying to them, because we know the tax law, we can apply the tax law, we can keep them out of audits. If there is an audit, we know the rules, so we can minimize the tax. We have understanding of transactions so that we can recommend certain transactions be entered into one way versus another, which ultimately save a significant amount of tax. And so that, to me, is one of the advantages of going into the tax realm, is to be able to provide guidance and insight to help taxpayers save money. And most would be happy to pay me $20,000 if I can save them $150,000 in taxes, right?
So Dan, you're speaking to that value proposition that as tax advisors, as CPAs and accountants for companies and for their clients. Is that something, do you think the future of the accountants, do you think that that's what they also value? Because I feel like that's the thing that would be the important kind of the factor in whether a student decides to become an accountant or not. Are they clear on that value proposition, or
I'm not
I don't
sure
know.
they're thinking much at this point that
Right.
far down the road. I think they're more conceptually thinking of, hey, I just want to get a job, right? And I try to focus on the fact that a job is different than a career, and you're actually going into a career of accounting. And so there's a difference between that, because it's not just going in from 8 to 5 and then after you leave at 5 o'clock you're done, because after 5 o'clock in a career you're reading updates on tax law or accounting pronouncements or doing other things to keep up within the profession. So there's definitely a difference between a job and a career, but at this point I think all they're thinking of is, how do I start to work after graduation and start to make money, and I can start to pay back my student loans or buy a new car and those kinds of things. So I think that's where they're thinking at right now, and it's probably another 5 or 7 years before they're going to start thinking, okay, well, how is this accounting firm structured, and should I be doing value-based billing versus just billing for my time? And I think that's certainly changing. I hear more and more companies talking about doing value-based billing versus just billing based on time. So I think that's good for the industry. I think that'll be beneficial to the industry overall.
Yeah, I can appreciate that the 18-year-old's not really gonna, and also it's hard to think like, all right, well, if I first walk out of college and I'm 22 and I get my first job and I'm call it an auditor, I think we would always joke that really the first 2 years of your auditing career, you're, reconciling cash.
Yep.
So it's hard to maybe think about like, oh yeah, I have a client every other, I have a standing call at 8 a.m. with my client in the UK. And half the time we're just talking about what's going on each side of each side of the ocean.
Right.
And it's like, you can't, when you're 22, really think about like the relationships that you're going to have with people just as like, a human outside of work. Then
I think that's right.
So, but I think that's probably my favorite part about my job, is just being able to formulate those relationships and come back to them and just be really not only ingrained in part of like their business, but part of their lives, and like get that human aspect of it that, that we often get as that kind of advisor and being there. And, we've had, even this last couple weeks, a lot of recurring clients come back where it's like they've left their company and they're like, well, we're going to go to TaxOps because we know that they can either do it or they know how, or they can point us in the right direction. And so that's kind of been just my favorite part about being an accountant and being here. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Just the ability to interact with clients, to get to know them on somewhat of a personal level, but at the end of the day, be able to provide them excellent tax advice that they can ultimately benefit from. So, and you end up seeing it in the final product, in the tax return, in reduced amount of tax that they have to pay on a transaction, or structuring it so that it's tax-free, whatever it happens to be. But I think that too, those additional complexities is something that, again, is pushing some people away from the profession. I mean, I think if you look at just within tax law, I really didn't mind reading regulations from the 1970s, 1980s, because they might be 20, 30, 40 pages long. And it's more along the lines of, hey, here's the concept, here's what you aren't supposed to do, here's what you can do. And over time, we've had creative individuals, very ingenious individuals who would read those 30, 40 pages of regulations and go, oh, well, it doesn't specifically say that I can't do this. And so they would do it. They would take the position on the tax return. It would go through the court system, and eventually they might get a judge that says, hey, you're right. It doesn't exactly say that you can't do that. And so taxpayer wins. And so now we have a situation where every time there's a change in Congress, Treasury Department issues regulations, but they're not 20 or 30 pages. They're 300 or 400 or 500 pages.
I was going to say, you got to add a couple zeros to the back end of that reg.
To respond to every potential evasion that might happen, trying to plug up this hole, cast out that net, to be in a situation where we're outlining specifically what it is you can or can't do. Well, now you got 400 pages that you have to read. And so that's just adding that much more complexity. And that's just one example. I mean, the whole thing has happened on the accounting side as well, right? I mean, we had FAS 109, we had FIN 48, got codified into ASC 740, but it's just more and more and more rules and complexities that accountants have to deal with, whether they're focused on auditing, whether they're focused on tax work. Those additional complexities are part of the reason why we need more and more people going into the profession to respond to those situations that our clients might be up against.
Yeah, and I think if you consider state and local tax, you add a few more zeros to the jurisdictions and complexities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the company, the organizations, it's like a pie, and every state wants a little piece of the pie, and there's only so much pie to divvy up. And I mean, state and local tax has just exploded over the last 15 years, not just sales and use tax, but from an income tax perspective. But again, that gets back to globalization and the internet and how we are engaging in business and the implication of engaging in that business in other jurisdictions, right? And now we're adding more complexity because I've got that little company in Colorado, let's say, but now because of their footprint, they're creating exposures. Maybe it's economic exposure. Maybe now that I've got economic exposure, how do I source my revenues? How do I source my sales? Is it cost of performance? Is it market-based? I mean, the rules are just adding on and on and on, and that additional complexity, right? We all get it. We deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But when you start presenting all of those in the classroom, some students are pushing back a bit. I mean, I do have some students. They've gone through, they got their accounting major, but they're not using it as going into public accounting or doing debits and credits at a particular organization. I've got individuals that have gone into financial institutions and are doing other work with their accounting major, not actually doing accounting work. So they've not come back to me and said, hey, I wish I hadn't got an accounting major, because I think it's exposed them to information that they can use within the business environment. But at the same time, some people are frustrated with the complexity and they don't want to continue focusing on that after they do graduate.
Right. It's that push-pull of the dynamic nature of what we do, because everything is changing. Mm-hmm. And being kind of passionate about, it's like, yes, like I'm constantly learning and I'm going to be knowing new things at the same time. It's like, well, if I can't know everything, I'm going to know nothing. And it's just too much to how can I ever be good at something if it's always changing?
Mhm.
So I can understand how there could be some tension created between that, like, want for static in a dynamic world.
Yeah. Yeah. At the same time, for people that are a bit more seasoned, we understand that that's the process. And so we kind of thrive on that change. And we understood how the rules worked, for example, pre-Wayfair. But now we understand how the rules have to work after Wayfair. And so we have to implement those, and that provides additional opportunities for us. And to some extent, we thrive on that ability to be able to understand those rules and apply it to our clients, right? So that can be, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and it's like that opportunity of collaboration, right? You know, as you kind of move forward, it's like you meet people, you know, people, kind of going back to that connection piece. But it's like, hey, what did Illinois just do to their law? Like, what does that even mean? And they're like, well, I have no idea. Like Colorado and their delivery fee. What did they do? And so we have other practitioners reaching out and saying, hey, what's happening in your state? And so it's also kind of just like another way of collaborating and staying in touch with just, you know, others around you. And again, I can appreciate that it's hard for an 18-year-old to see the forest through the trees, right?
Sure. Yes. But at the same time, those, you know, when Colorado puts that rule in place, then you're going to get piggyback. And so now you're going to have other states that are going to be looking at that and go, oh, well, that's a good idea. We'll do that too, right?
Yeah.
So that just fosters additional complexity
right
down the road.
I guess it does take a special one to be an accountant, huh?
For sure.
Well, Dan, we really appreciate the conversation. Is there anything kind of you think that, you know, the profession can do as we wrap up? Any sort of, you know, last thoughts, any brainstorming ideas to kind of pull people back in?
Yeah, I think if we want to increase the pipeline of individuals going into accounting, we probably need to start well before the college level. I've got a lot of students that might already come in with 30 credits, right? And they're trying to get out in 3 years. And so to be able to pull the trigger on an accounting degree, if they hadn't already thought of that before they came in, is pretty hard. So I think we need to hit the high schools and have the high schools highlight what the benefits of an accounting profession can be. I think people are more familiar with lawyers and doctors and other professions. So I think we need to focus on what is it that an accountant really does. I still get students that go, well, I'm not good at math, and so I don't want to be an accountant. Don't worry about that. We've got calculators, we've got Excel. You don't have to be good at math.
We've got the law side. Again, probably play more of a lawyer than I do a mathematician.
Absolutely. Right. That's very true as well. In addition, I don't want to be sitting at my computer in a little cubicle doing debits and credits for the next 40 years. So I think there's a misconception in terms of what accountants do, because it is very dynamic. Yeah, you've got to do a bit of that to understand the nuts and bolts, but it's not long before you're going out and meeting with clients and working with them and understanding their business backgrounds and being able to present advisory ideas so that they can run their business better. And that can be on the accounting side, it could be on the tax side, whatever it happens to be. So we need to do a better job at sooner, right, in the high school level to present these opportunities. And so that can either happen within individual schools, maybe something from the AICPA, something in order to get to students sooner so that they're either thinking about, hey, I think I might want to go into accounting. I've got these types of skills, and so I want to apply those. But somehow to present them with, this is another avenue for somebody that has these particular traits.
So Dan, what do you think about even reaching students earlier, like grade school, middle school? Because I take a lot of leadership roles. I'm a part of a lot of initiatives here in Texas, and we've done a lot of legwork working with AICPA, and some of the trends or some of the research and information that we're gathering says students by the 8th grade are making career choices. So it's almost like as they choose classes to take in high school, they already are making those choices.
If your evidence is suggesting that they're already considering that at the grade school level, then that's where we probably need to start implementing some concepts of, this is another avenue.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not for everybody, but at least
Right.
it's something that you should consider. Right. And so the earlier the better, because I think you're probably right. I think and then the high schools need to be able to respond with, okay, well, let's have some initial bookkeeping / accounting courses that people can take to introduce them to the concepts, right?
And then also the dual credits too, because like, all the AP or dual credits, I think there are a lot of schools and school districts, and in Texas, we have, I don't know, 1,700 school districts, something crazy and outrageous, but every school district has their own program. And so there are certain programs that do focus on accounting and finance and bookkeeping,
but
others don't.
Yeah.
And so where I think there should be some big, push for having more of that and allowing students to, bring, or at least provide them the opportunity to get the dual credit, to get ahead of the game, to have those opportunities to earn college credits. So that they, kind of what you're saying, by the time you get them, they've got these credits and other things that really don't count or, won't further their accounting degree. So it's almost like kind of strategically planting those seeds to help them succeed.
Yes, I think that that's a perfect way to summarize it. We need to get to them sooner so that they're at least thinking about that might be an avenue. And right now, I think that it's kind of off the table. They're not thinking, oh, an accounting profession is something that I should at least consider. And so we have to do something. And if that's at the grade school level, at the high school level, we have to work towards providing them information so that they can make a good decision as to what they want to do for a career.
Well, Dan, this is excellent insight, and appreciate your time, and also kind of the pivot away from some more technical law case review, just to kind of take a step back. And always good to see you. Thanks, for those listeners. Dan hired me almost 12 years ago at TaxOps, and so it's been fun to come back full circle on this. So thank you for being here.
It's definitely been good to see you as well. Good to catch up. Wish you the best, Meredith. Tram, look forward to our next meeting as well, and wish you a wonderful day.
All right.
Thank
and
you
this
so
is
much.
another episode of SALTovation. Till next time.